Just imagine one of those situations that you might have been thinking about, that you needed to turn to the Bible for comfort. Hands up if you'd go straight to Ecclesiastes. Yeah. Not many of us, right? Not many of us. It's not usually our go-to book, is it? And it's tricky in some ways, and frankly, it can look a bit depressing. So, as Sue said, this KYB study of Ecclesiastes is subtitled Wrestling with Life. But we could just as easily have called it, What's the Point? In fact, it was one of the taglines we considered. As a Christian, do you sometimes feel you should only ever be joyful and positive? I know I have sometimes felt pressure to be positive when it actually felt fake. Can we be honest with ourselves, with God and other Christians? Ecclesiastes answers this question. A couple of us were talking before. Issues like, should I always feel at peace? We're kind of told we should. Is that right? That we should feel it? We have peace with God. Do we always feel it? Not necessarily, if we're honest. And one of the things that the writer of this study, Jenny Baddeley, has brought out is this is actually an opportunity for us to be honest with each other in our groups. Most of us like things tied up in neat little packages. It's this or it's that. One of the lessons from Ecclesiastes is that life doesn't work that way. And it's still okay. I wonder if perhaps these pictures represent Ecclesiastes better than a this or that kind of scenario. The background might sometimes be dark for us, but there are shafts of light and there is still beauty. You'll often hear people say, I'm a glass half full person, or he's a glass half empty person. Would it surprise you that Ecclesiastes challenges this idea? Look at the picture. What do you see? Or more importantly, what do you actually see? Is the glass half full or half empty? Or is there something wrong with my question? Isn't it both? It's both. And that's the perspective that the teacher, the one who wrote Ecclesiastes, takes. He looks life squarely in the face and sees the negative stuff. He faces it realistically, but he also sees the good, the blessings that God gives. So it's not either this or that, good or bad. The writer's perspective is, this is life. Good things and bad things mixed together. But how do we make sense of it all? What's the point? Hold that thought for a minute. Who wrote Ecclesiastes? The writer describes himself as the teacher, son of David, king in Jerusalem. That's the first verse. And then a bit later, a few verses later, he says, I, the teacher, was king over Israel in Jerusalem. So it looks like it's probably Solomon, though it could possibly have been someone who was writing as if he was Solomon. A lot of the details that he reveals fit what we know about Solomon's life, his wisdom, his wealth, being king. But we don't have to get too worried about exactly who this writer was. We're mainly interested in what he wrote. He calls himself Kohelet, teacher, or even one who addresses the assembly. So his aim was to pass on what he had learnt about life. And he learnt it the hard way. This is not theoretical knowledge. This is wisdom he has learnt through life's experiences. What exactly is Ecclesiastes? And it's really important to get a handle on this. We're used to being able to quote bits of the Bible. Sometimes we even cherry pick verses out of context, which I don't really recommend. But in Ecclesiastes, we have to be extremely careful. We have to wait to see what the book says as a whole, the teacher's final conclusion. Otherwise, we risk getting completely the wrong message, not what the writer intended. Another book like that is Job, actually. And so you have to wait to the end. And that's because as we read Ecclesiastes, the writer takes us with him on a journey as he seeks to understand life. Sorry, Greg, can we just have one more click? Thank you. Thank you. He tries this and he finds it doesn't work. So he tries the next thing, and the next thing, and the next thing. And he sort of meanders through all the things. He relates all these things that he has tried and doubles back sometimes. At various points in the book, he seems to come to a conclusion. It's all meaningless. But take care. Meaningless doesn't necessarily mean meaningless as we would think of it. More on that in a minute. And the second thing, until you get to the end, it's not his final conclusion. You have to wait to the end of the book to see where his journey of discovery ended, what he really found out. In our society, there are plenty of people who try the things the teacher tried in order to find meaning, or to just escape from having to think about meaning in their lives. He tried pleasure, food, wine, women, cheering himself up. None of that worked. He tried throwing himself into work, building projects, creating beautiful gardens, amassing wealth, and he enjoyed his work. But when he took a step back and weighed it all up, it was here and gone. It had no lasting value. Do you know people who try to hide themselves in food and wine and sex? People who throw themselves into their work as if their lives depended on it. Perhaps you have someone near and dear to you like this. For the teacher, all these activities were his way of searching for meaning, longing to find a deeper purpose in life. That might also be the case for the person you know. Or perhaps they just want to escape from thinking about anything at all. The teacher even set out quite deliberately to find out what is good. Where did it get him? Nowhere for a long time. As you read Ecclesiastes, remember the teacher is wrestling with these issues. He nearly finds an answer and then it slips through his fingers. Isn't that what happens to us often? He cycles back to the same point again, backwards and forwards, as we do when we wrestle with hard issues. This is very realistic in how we try to understand things. Now, I said a moment ago that meaningless doesn't necessarily mean meaningless, which might sound a bit weird. The NIV uses meaningless so our KYB studies do. Other English translations use words like vanity of vanities, not in the sense of being vain, pride, but of being in vain, pointless, which is the word some translations use. The Holman has absolute futility. Good News says useless. So why don't they all translate it the same way? Well, this book was written almost 3,000 years ago in Hebrew. There is no neat English equivalent for the Hebrew word. Be nice if there was, there just isn't. If you are to understand Ecclesiastes well, you need to get a handle on this idea that meaningless does not necessarily mean meaningless. Sometimes it does, it depends on the context. Why do you need to get a handle on it? Because if you don't, you will probably misunderstand the book. It's that vital. And if you think that the word simply means meaningless, you'll probably find Ecclesiastes completely depressing when it isn't. The Hebrew word translated as meaningless is hebel or hevel. Hebrew words change a bit. Literally, it means breath, mist, vapour, steam, all things that are real but that we can't grab hold of. Things that are here and gone. So when you see meaningless, the teacher usually means here and gone, without substance, hard to pin down, or of no lasting value, even useless. He is grasping after meaning and he can never quite get hold of it. Just like trying to grab a handful of mist. Or things have meaning in the moment, but then they're here and gone. There's no lasting meaning. This man's name is Jeff Allen. He's an American comedian and he's a rare breed because he's a clean comedian. He describes what he was like 20 odd years ago. Not a nice man. I was angry, bitter, jaded, cynical. I was condescending at home. I just could not stop the rage. He was into cocaine and addicted to alcohol. His marriage and family life were in deep trouble. He was an atheist. When he went to AA, they told him to pray to something bigger than he was. And he went, well, I don't believe God exists. And they said, well, make up something. And he went, that's just stupid. Like, if I make up an idea of God, whatever this idea is less than I am. Like, that just didn't make sense to him at all. Jeff tried all sorts of things. Self-help, New Age spirituality, Buddhism, chanting, self-affirmation. You know, when you stand in front of the mirror each morning and tell yourself how wonderful you are. Yeah, it's quite an American thing. But it's a thing. People do that and they swear by it. Materialism. He had so many questions but no answers, and he just wanted answers. And so he looked for them in all those different places. I think I've got it this time. But driving him were questions. Why? What's the point? What difference does it make? Where can I find peace? The very same questions we find in Ecclesiastes. Jeff was bankrupt and had filed for divorce. A friend had sent him tapes of sermons, solid Bible teaching, and Jeff left them in a pile for 18 months. And then one day, out of the pile of sermon tapes, he picked up a tape on the Gospel of John? No, Ecclesiastes. And Jeff heard, meaningless, meaningless, it's all meaningless. That is, without God, it's all meaningless. He thought the Bible was this weird book, but here's a part of the Bible that put into words what he was wrestling with. His search for meaning, his confusion. And through the book of Ecclesiastes, God put Jeff on a path that led him to Jesus. Can you imagine someone coming to Jesus because of the book of Ecclesiastes? You know, it's beyond our experience for most of us. So don't write the book off. Jeff realised that he didn't have to pretend that everything was okay. He realised, in his own words, life without God will have no meaning. Without meaning, there's no purpose in your life, and you might as well be dead. Jeff Allen met God and the Bible through, of all things, the book of Ecclesiastes, and so he ultimately met Jesus. There are people in our world, maybe people close to us, who are hurting and filled with questions. They don't need nice, neat little moral platitudes to be told it's all okay, don't worry about it. They need to look reality in the face and see that God, and only God, makes sense of it all. A relationship with God makes sense of it all. It changes everything. It changes our perspective completely. Life has value because it's a gift from God. And that's the essence of Ecclesiastes. Life without God is meaningless, in vain, futile. And that's the real conclusion that the teacher comes to. Nothing in this life outside of God will in itself give you meaning, purpose, or lasting joy. But who'd have thought that someone would come to Christ because he listened to tapes on Ecclesiastes? Let's go back to the glass half full, half empty idea. Our society tells us, be positive. The teacher says, that's futile. It's a waste of time. It's here and gone. He tells us to take a good, hard look at life. He wants us to be realistic, not a pessimist, not an optimist, but a realist. The glass is both half empty and half full. There are bad things, but there are good things too, and we should enjoy them. So many good things in life: enjoying meals with family and friends, working, creating things. They're all good. And they are sweeter when we acknowledge that they are gifts from our loving Creator. But we also need to remember that we grow old and die. We all have to wrestle with the idea of death. And we should enjoy the gifts because they're good gifts from God, but we hold them lightly because, like steam, they will be gone one day. They'll slip through our fingers. As you read Ecclesiastes, if all you focus on is the negative stuff, death, meaningless, all that stuff, you'll probably find the book depressing. But Ecclesiastes presents us with joy and good things as well. The teacher repeatedly tells us to eat and drink and enjoy it. My favourite verse comes in chapter 12, verses, when the teacher has finally got his head around it. And the teacher gives us word pictures of death. Now, granted, that sounds like a strange part to have as your favourite verse in the book. But I hope you'll see. And they are these pictures: a severed cord, a broken golden bowl, a shattered pitcher, and a broken wheel. And we might go, well, that's just really sad. They're all like, how is that good? That's his picture of death. But if you look carefully at what he's saying, what do those pictures tell us about his picture of life? It's a precious silver cord. It's a beautiful and precious golden bowl. It's a pitcher that would have held life-giving water, and a wheel at the well, a useful thing that probably drew up water for people. So you could look at those pictures and go, well, that's just all depressing. But if you actually think about what he's saying, these are beautiful pictures of life. When they're severed or broken, the teacher says the spirit returns to God who gave it. So the broken things are death, but take in the pictures of life, precious, beautiful, useful, life-giving. Is the glass half full or half empty? It's both. Is life fragile? Yes, absolutely. Does it come to an end? Yes. But it is also a precious thing of beauty. It's both. Here's a verse not many people know, though it's a favourite of a man I know. Even a live dog is better off than a dead lion. Okay. What does that mean? Dogs were looked down on. They were mangy, mongrel things scavenging around. While lions, of course, were images of strength and power. But a live dog is better off than a dead king of the beasts. Why? Because life is precious. While we live, we have hope, the teacher says. So if you read carefully what's there, I'm not suggesting you read into the Bible stuff that isn't there, but if you take note of what's there, you'll see the teacher, despite all that he says about meaninglessness, he values life. Why is life such a precious gift? Because it's from God. But it's fragile, and so we need to live our lives. If we're living wisely, we will recognise that our life will come to an end one day. And so we live in light of that fact. We appreciate all the good things while we have them. And we want to have a relationship with God in the meantime. So what purpose is there in life? Remember your Creator, says the teacher. Fear God. Acknowledge him as God. Honour and obey him. Keep his commandments, he says. What has God commanded us to do today? Believe in his Son, the Lord Jesus Christ. Life without God is meaningless. But life with God is not. He gives our lives meaning, and we have something far greater to look forward to after death. Can you see why this KYB study of Ecclesiastes is entitled Wrestling with Life? And why we could have called it, What's the Point? You'll hear the writer say that there's nothing new under the sun. He's right. Life can be unpredictable, he says. Right again. The strong and the swift do not always win. People can work hard and then something unexpected happens. But we still work because the outcome is in God's hands. We cannot always fix life's problems, much as we would like to, and how dearly we would like to sometimes. But we can trust God in them. We often don't know what to do, but we can seek the wisdom of the teacher and ask God for his wisdom. All of these things are the pieces of wisdom that the teacher shares with us. At the start, I asked, do you sometimes feel you should only ever be joyful and positive? Ecclesiastes shows us that we can be honest with ourselves, with God, and with other Christians. Just because we have questions, that doesn't mean we doubt God. It means we're trying to make sense of his world and our place in it. And we don't have to have nice, neat, pat answers for ourselves or when our friends are struggling. We can sit with them. We can tell them that God really, really gets it. He truly understands. And we know he does because he has included books like Ecclesiastes in his inspired word. Faithful people of God who have gone before us have struggled with these issues too. It's okay if we do. Wisdom ultimately is better than foolishness. Life is sweet and precious. Enjoy the life God's given you and remember your Creator. Lots of wise words in the book of Ecclesiastes, and I pray that studying it will be a great blessing to you.